All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Reading Across the Shelf. July's theme is all about disability rep in books, of course, because we talk about books all the time. And that's because July is actually Disability Pride Month in recognition of the ADA or I need to look it up, American with Disability Act, ADA, that was put in place in July 1990. So, of course, we had to talk about that. And one of the books, or one of the series rather, that really stands out for me with that representation is the Last Gift series by Allegra Pescatore. Pescatore? How do I pronounce your name?
Pescatore. It's a little bit weird because in English you pronounce it one way and in Italian you pronounce it a little bit differently. So
Okay, Pescatore. Okay, I'll try to do my best during the video. And there she is.
hello.
Awesome. So while we usually focus, when we do the reading across the shelves, usually we focus on gazillion books and we share a lot of books. We will do that as well as part of this interview. And you can do that during the comments as well. So just because this is not a live, meeting thingy magic, it doesn't mean you cannot share your favorite books with disability representation down in the comments. And just to clarify, when we talk about disability, we talk about everything that falls into that category. So from mental disability to sensory disability to visible and invisible disability. So all the books that you think others should read, put them down in the comments. We definitely want to hear all the recommendations. But enough preambles. Allegra, I want to talk with you, but before we start talking about your amazing series, The Last Gift, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Allegra Pescatore, as you've been kind enough to introduce. I write in a variety of fantasy and science fiction genres and a whole bunch of genre hopping nonsense. And most of my books feature disabled protagonists of one form or another. I am disabled myself. I have a rare genetic disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which causes a whole host of symptoms, but mostly chronic dislocations and passing out a lot. So I live in a constant state of having an invisible illness, and it felt really important for me when I started writing to write the books that I loved, which were big adventures with dragons and pirates, but with people like me front and center, because I got very tired of being the sickly little sister left behind or the reason the hero goes off and slays the dragon. I wanted to do it myself. So that's what got me started. And also, my other big thing that I'm very passionate about is co-authoring. A lot of my books are co-authored. I work very closely with a lot of other authors, and I absolutely love the dynamic material that comes up when you're working with others.
Yeah, awesome. So the Last Gift series, though, was only authored by you, right? So you were the main author there. There are other series that we talk about in a little bit as well, where we can talk a little bit more about your collaborations that you're doing. But particular for the Last Gift series, by the way, I'm super prepared here. Hang on. Hold, please. Hold music. Super not prepared, I should say. Is this beautiful book here. I just want to share that with a whole bunch of glare because I think the cover especially is already amazing, and that's what got my attention there as well. So what is the Last Gift series about?
The Last Gift series is a gas lamp epic fantasy intrigue series. I don't do genres. I just kind of write books. But it is a series that takes place in the wake of the Chosen One's death. And his disabled little sister has to take his place along with a whole host of colorful characters. And it has been part of my life since I was 8 years old. So it's hard to really summarize it because it's been with me for most of my life.
Really, you've been working on that series since you're 8 years old, and now you just have the book birthday of the third book in the series, These Gossamer Strings, right? So that is pretty amazing. So this is really your child that you're bringing out in the world, which is amazing, by the way. Just, total unbiased opinion over here.
Yeah, it's been an adventure, and even though I'm the only author on the cover, it's not really a solo operation. There have been people who have chimed in on world building, and my crew behind the scenes, my friend who I played with little Playmobil figurines when I was 8, developing these characters. It took a village to get these books out.
Awesome. Yeah. And I have to say, because you said you have a hard time with genres, I find it difficult to put yours in the genre too. I mean, yes, it's fantasy, like as a super overarching thing, but that's what I find so interesting about your series, because you have a little bit of sci-fi in there, you have a little bit of modern, like while it is really epic fantasy, there's a lot of modern twists to it with showers, which I thought was super surprising. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing that a lot of people don't realize when going in, and is a only mild spoiler, because if you go on my website or follow Project AO at all, you know that this is happening, is it's all sci-fi. It's happening far in the future. So while we wanted to write these individual worlds that have strong genres, Dracona, where the Last Gift series happens, is epic fantasy. But we decided that we didn't want medieval fantasy. We wanted something that took the core concepts of the magic system, the ecology, the geology of the planet, and the meddlesome influence of gods, and gave it its own flavor. So they're way behind in some things and way advanced in others. And it created something that kind of organically sprung out of the world building.
Yeah, and that's the next thing that why I find the series so fascinating, is because it's not just the series in the Dracona world. You talked about the AO collective. Like you learn throughout the series, and it's again not a huge spoiler if you're on the website or if you look at the other books that you've published. You built actually a universe, not just a world. You build a whole universe with multiple series in that universe. So how did you come up with that? How did that get started? And where are you with that right now?
Sure. So that started pretty early. I was about 13 when I met Tobias Tobak, who has been my right-hand person in almost all Project AO things ever since. And we were in high school, and this was before Brandon Sanderson published The Cosmere. This was before a whole bunch of the people who have been doing multiverses since then came out with them. But we had this crazy idea of what if there was one setting with a lot of different genres in it, because we wanted to play. We wanted to play with sci-fi, but we wanted to play with fantasy. And once you start playing collaboratively, you want all your characters to meet. You want your sci-fi spaceship captains to meet your epic fantasy princesses. And the other part that kind of inspired us was fan fiction. There's this wonderful thing that happens in fanfic spaces where authors jump in and expand the glossed over material that books leave, side characters, pieces of history. And that's my favorite type of fanfic, not the ones that rewrite, but the ones that fill in the gaps and give like plausible explanations for why things happen the way they did.
Yeah.
And so we got this question of why can't we do that, but make it publishable, not make it just fan fiction. And so we started this thing called Project AO, which was inviting other authors to come in and work in the same worlds and fill in the gaps. And I have some people working on series that take some of my characters who are super side characters and give them a whole rich life before the story ever started. And it's difficult because, as authors, we like control. We like, there are characters, there are babies.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily want to give them up. But I found that when you open yourself to that with some caveats, we make sure that the people in Project AO are following canon and are communicating and are part of the discussion. But it makes the worlds rich and it gives them depth because each of us is going to be interested in different things. And it has been such an amazing process to kind of let go of control and let these worlds start just blossoming on their own with other minds involved.
That is super interesting because I've only read the Last Gift series so far, including the novella, so I'm super excited to read the 2 other books as well. But what I've seen so far in the Last Gift series already, because you gave something away, but it comes back and it makes sense still at the end of the day. To your point of, worlds collide and characters visit the other series, that is very visible in The Last Gift.
Yes.
And it is so well done. It was such a surprise when I stumbled over that section in the book. It was like, what is happening here? Oh, that is interesting. Now that is a super twist here right now. So it is super interesting to see, to your point of, you didn't have the control. You didn't tell them, this is what you have to do. This is how the character have to be. You do you. We just need to make sure that all the threads at the end of the day come neatly together so it actually makes sense. And that is very well done. Understanding how big this thing is, right? I mean, it's not just a trilogy. That's the thing that I find so mind-blowing about the series. You can see how vast that universe is, and still everything makes sense at the end of the day. All the plot threads made sense at the end of the day, and I was like, okay, I don't think I've ever seen something that well done that was so vast in its description and in its plot. So
I think part of that is that we have this particular world building and story building methodology. And it was developed this last year. We had the amazing opportunity of all the authors of Project AO got together in person for the first time. We rented a cabin for a week, and we just spent the entire time world building and story building and plotting out our meta plot. And we have this core philosophy that story building and world building should expand in an organic manner from a single point. And everything has to connect back to that point. It's like a mind map, which means that it doesn't matter how far it spreads, you can always follow the trail back to one sentence or one core thought, and that each of the worlds of AO Collective has one, and then all of those are connected to the core meta plot. So it doesn't matter how far you spread, it's always coming back to the same core piece.
Did you at one point put like Post-its on a wall somewhere and put strings around it? Like
we had a table covered in butcher paper, and everyone had a different color pen. And we were just going wild, and it was like Twister. We were on top of each other. The most fun I think I've ever had.
Oh my goodness. I hope you have pictures of that. I would love to see one.
We still have the paper. It's huge. Oh I still have it up in my attic.
Well, you have to, right? Because how do you remember otherwise? How do you make sure
exactly
literally the strings come back together? How many authors are part of the AO Collective?
We have a rotating cast, but it's approximately 10 regularly are part of things. We are always open for new authors to come in, and so far it's been at a rate of 1 or 2 per year. Kind of stumble upon us, usually from our Discord channel. And what we let people do is, as long as they are competent writers who have proven that they can put a book out or can get material actually written, we let them come and explore. We sign a very simple contract and give them access to everything in the back end and let them play around until they're ready to say, nope, this is too big for me, or they start writing a book.
Yeah.
And it's been fantastic.
So you have one trilogy published right now, which is not a fully closed out trilogy, right? It's the first story arc of that, the Last Gift series, but we have the first trilogy out with 2 short novellas, which are also very fun to read, by the way. You have 2 first books of 2 other series out. One I have actually laying here is a Bond of Thread, apologies, which was also covered by, just FYI. And the other one, and there I have to ask for pronunciation again because I will get this wrong, is
NACL.
NACL. Okay, so you just have the individual letters. Gotcha.
Yep. It is a world without salt. Hence
the name.
So the 3 series are really, we started here partially because they were the series we were dying to write, but also because they each provide a very different function within Project AO. The Last Gift is the flagship series that has the tightest plot, the most self-contained world, and is really the beginning of things going horribly wrong. Eleanor being where she was and doing what she did in the prologue of Where Shadows Lie sets off alarm bells through the entirety of the AO Collective. So that was important to start there. But the other two each form their own part of this as well. The Mountain Fell series, it starts with A Bond of Thread, is kind of our flagship for the collaborative nature of the AO Collective. It every single book is going to have different authors and different pairings, and we're switching up, and we have characters all over the place. And so that series is kind of slow going because there's so many people working on it, but there's a lot of momentum behind it, and it's very dynamic because of what's going on. And then NACL is the introduction to the meta of Project AO. It involves a character called Mo, who I think you've already met, and he is everywhere. He is the character who can hop between worlds with ease, and does, and has his hands in every single world. So we wanted to introduce him and his story and his origins, really, so that when we get further and further and further into the variety of series, it will all make sense.
That makes sense. So having said that, knowing that we have a couple of books out yet, what is your recommended reading order for those books? Because I know that is very specific too, and you put a lot of thought in that too.
Generally publication order.
All right.
But it is meant, I like writing books that can be reread. It's something that I've always enjoyed doing. I reread books again and again and again, and I want people to get something different out of every reread. So I pepper a ton of little Easter eggs throughout. I have someone who read up to Gossamer Strings that is now rereading Where Shadows Lie, and every like 5 minutes she messages me and like, why did you just told us this on like page 12?
Oh, okay. I might have to do that then. All righty.
Especially about Claire. There's a lot of little spoilers about Claire early on.
Oh, I can see that. Okay. Oh, now I'm excited. Well, as soon as you come out with book 4, I will do the whole reread again anyway. So, all right. All right.
But other than that, I want there to be a different experience if you read The Last Gift first, or if you read NACL first, or if you read A Bond of Thread first. And no matter what order you go in, the series themselves should make sense, but the whole feels different. If you read NACL first, you get to Where Shadows Lie, and you're like, oh, I know what this is. Oh, okay. I know this is all just smoke and mirrors, and we're dealing with science fiction. And if you read Where Shadows Lie first, you really think that you're in a fantasy novel until book 3, when suddenly you realize that maybe you're not.
Yeah, well, that's how I approached it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I read Where Shadows Lie based on the Escapist book tour that you signed up for and that I was part of back in May, I think. By the way, if you want to see the review of Where Shadows Lie, go right ahead. And for me, it was like I was sitting there in that review, epic fantasy, awesome, and totally great, till I read these Gossamer Strings and was like, well, hang on a second here. What's happening? Yep, I can attest to that. Oh.
Time I get a review critiquing the modern language and like, it doesn't seem realistic that epic fantasy people would talk this way, there's a part of me that just starts giggling hysterically and it makes my day.
And that's the part that I actually also, I mean, among the gazillion other things that I love about this series, that's something that really impressed me because, to your point, epic fantasy is always written in a medieval flair with older-ish language and, just very expansive, and everything has to be explained in riddles and whatnot. Yours is straightforward. Your characters swear like crazy, which I found so refreshing. And then, yeah, to your point, it absolutely makes sense. Once you're at book 3, you're like, oh yeah, okay, now I understand. And I'm sure once I read NACL and the A Bond of Thread, why can I not say this title straightforward? A Bond of Thread, I will probably have a lot more aha moments too in that regards. Yeah.
Yeah, get ready for Swear Fest in NACL. It is the most vulgar of all the books, and I love
it.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that is perfectly fine. I mean, because the world is evolving, right? The genre itself is evolving, and you're doing a big part of that by mixing all of these genres. I think it's just natural to adapt everything so it makes sense. And
it's also something that we indie authors get to do.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I never queried a single time. I didn't send a single query letter. I always knew I was going to go indie because I wanted to play with genre conventions.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something crazy, like have a whole bunch of authors writing in the same series. And I knew that traditional publishing would never allow that.
Yeah, no. And they would probably have cut out a lot of really good parts of the book. So no, we don't want that. Talking about the Last Gift series, I alluded to that earlier. The third book basically just is coming out on July 12th, where this is going to air. So it's your book birthday. And if you think about it, that was, I mean, first of all, it's a chunker. Like I saw the page count was 921 pages,
Yes.
which doesn't read like that. I mean, I read it in 3 days and I never read 900 pages in 3 days, never. So it was super fast paced. Anyway, I'm getting into gushing about it right now. But if you look at it, and that was one of the fascinating parts for me as well, when you look at it where Shadows Lie started, where Whispers of Stone then brought you to, and how these Gossamer Strings then ended, like, did you know at the beginning exactly where your characters were going? Did your characters tell you as part of the writing process? Like, how did you get there?
So when I said that I've been writing this since I was 8, I've written this a lot of times. So this started with literal Playmobil figurines, and I had all the characters, but we would every like week or two we would tell a completely different story with them. So one time Eleanor would be a princess and Gabriel would be a rebel, but the next time they'd be swapped.
Okay.
And we'd tell a completely different story. So I was already very comfortable with playing with the plot lines, because for me, writing is play. I don't get attached to plot lines.
Yeah.
I just kind of let them be. But I'm also a plotter. I have these giant spreadsheets. I plot everything out. I'm very detail oriented. So when I first wrote Where Shadows Lie, it actually went all the way up to and past where these Gossamer Strings goes, as far as where Eleanor ends up.
Yeah.
But in a completely different way. It was a road trip book. She and Gabriel just go off cross country and they end up like on the other coast, and there's a whole different plot. It was nuts. So eventually I cut a book in half and I published it as Where Shadows Lie.
Mm-hmm.
But at the very last minute, some early beta readers said, well, the ending doesn't work. So 2 weeks before publication, I changed the ending. So I published.
Okay.
And you guys know, for those who have read it, you know what happens at the end and who dies, the various people who die, important things happen.
Oh yeah, don't get attached to things in this book.
So I started writing Whispers of Stone, and suddenly I had half a book that I had written, and I had to toss it all out the window because I just killed one of our several of our characters who were supposed to be a big antagonist. So then I was lost, and around that time my health issues got real bad. So I kind of just let Eleanor get sick and played it by ear a little bit more than I'm usually comfortable with. And what was interesting was that a lot of the same events occurred, but they occurred differently, and characters evolved in ways that I absolutely did not expect. And it became such a avenue for me to process my own feelings of disability and my own health issues. I mean, I wrote most of Whispers of Stone and Gossamer Strings unable to breathe because of these asthma flares that I've been getting. So this constant struggle of keeping it together and keeping all the politics in my head had to be reflected in my characters, because I wasn't smart enough. I didn't have enough oxygen at the time to figure it all out.
Interesting way of saying this. Okay.
So it did evolve kind of organically. But in some ways, I'm very excited because I've never really written past these Gossamer Strings. I've rewritten in 1,000 different ways up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm off in a completely new world, and I've never been as excited about it as I am now.
So what is next? Do you have any idea already where everybody is going?
Yes, I know exactly what's happening. Well, I know vaguely what's happening. I am fairly certain I'm going to be dividing the cast into 2 books that happen simultaneously, because by the time Gossamer Strings hits, there are 9 POV characters, and it is just too many. And there's a very natural geographic division that's about to happen, which when you finish Gossamer Strings, you know that some characters are going off in one direction and fleeing for their lives, and some are staying put. So they're gonna divide into two different books, but the big part of the next trilogy and what's going to like form the backbone of it is travel. It's all about reuniting an empire and getting there faster than other people trying to reunite the same empire. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
it's finally going to be a chance for me to go and explore all the regions of the world that I've never gotten to touch so far, and put these characters who I've kept basically in the same city for most of the first trilogy, and let them go to all the different places that I've been talking about. We get to go to Tirith Mindel, we get to go to Sehana, we get to go to Namnia, we get to go to North Island and its horrible, horrible, horrible cult. We get to see some very interesting people go to the Mundev Desert who are going to have, political implications for it. So I get to do what I love best, which is explore the world that has been brewing in my head for 20 years.
Oh my goodness. I'm excited. Oh my goodness. I'd like to have everything now, please. Can you just, once we stop recording, just info dump everything in my head so I know how it continues, because I got to know. Awesome. To give you one more reason, if you haven't yet already bought the book online while you were listening to us, but if you need yet another reason, the Last Gift series is also full of dragons. Not just the ones that you can ride, but when they're small and cute little baby dragons, you have them as pet. So a very important question for you. If you would have a pet dragon, what would you name it?
Oh, that's hard because I've kind of already written my favorite pet dragons into the world. Actually, the mock dragons are kind of a very close spot for me. I generally completely give their personalities based on the pets I have and or love. Riza in particular, who is Eleanor's mock. A very close friend of mine had a dog who unfortunately passed away when she was young, who was called Riza. And she was big and fluffy and white and did a very good protect. So when she passed away, they asked me to write her into the book. And it was perfect because I really needed Eleanor to have a service dragon. I have a service dog. It's great. He watches out for me. So I kind of wanted her to really have a similar experience to me as far as what disability felt like, and having an animal that is there that will keep you safe and alert when you're in trouble and carry you around eventually was really always something I had planned, and this was the perfect opportunity.
And it was amazing. It was so fun to watch those two bond and enjoy their life together. And I know that since the second book currently is part of that escapist tour now that is happening right this second, has the tagline, they use the tagline, "It's so fluffy." And I thought it was perfect. Like, I couldn't have said it any better.
Yeah, my little white dragons being fluff balls.
Yes.
I just, what I imagine in my head is essentially a snow leopard biting its own tail. And that is the vibe I get from white moss.
Oh my goodness, awesome. Okay, before we jump into talking a little bit more about other books that also have a disability representation, anything else that you want us to know about the AO Collective or the Last Gift series?
Generally just, I mean, I've said most of it. I think the core of it is, if you like books that are experimental, then you'll probably like what we're doing here. And if you like, things that just follow genre, in the lines, then we're not the right books. Like, we are a group of disabled queer weirdos who are doing weird things. But we really are trying to engage the community and each other as much as possible, and we want to not be writing this in a vacuum. So if you love these books and want to be part of them, come join us. It's a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk about other books that maybe even have inspired you while you were writing the Last Gift series, or books that you just generally enjoyed with a disability representation. Do you want to just get started? I have a handful as well.
So it's weird because part of the reason why I wrote these was because I hadn't really experienced books with disabled main characters. And then, of course, I published it and immediately discovered that like half of the indie author community has my same disease. um, I now have a group chat of authors with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and we're all ladies publishing epic fantasy for some unknown reason. um, but some authors that I always recommend, Sarah Chorn, who writes Honey for and Wildfires, and Seraphina's Lament, and all of those, is amazing, an amazing author, and also has a ton of disability representation in her work. Rachel Renner, who wrote The Lightning Conjurer and The Girl Who Talks to Ashes, is another author to look out for. And I think there's just, when you start looking at indie spaces, you find diversity. There are none of the barriers to entry the traditional publisher. There's not we can only publish 2 books a year that have disabled main characters because we want to reach our quota. And it means that we are experimental, and there are so many books out there once you start to look that like I could probably spend a year just reading books with disabled main characters written by disabled authors, and 90% of them are going to be indie.
That is very true. I find that very true in general for indie, for any type of representation, really, right? No matter in which diverse direction you're looking, indie is your go-to for those type of things. And then what I realized more, YA is becoming a lot more diverse as well.
Yes. I'm so excited to see the directions YA is going. It's very much now starting to become this playful genre. Instead, for a while there, it was just repeats of the same book over and over and over again. And then something happened the last couple of years, and suddenly it's bold and it's in your face and it's not scared to try new things. And that is exactly what I want to see in a genre.
Yeah. And thankfully, we're starting to see it a little bit more in the adult side too, even in traditional publishing. But you're absolutely right. It is a lot slower and you have to sift through. That's what I always find, since I work in marketing, so I know how marketing works, right? With when do you market something for trend reasons, or when are you actually behind something? And sifting through that with traditional publishing can be really tricky, but there are some good books out there. So Black Sun, as an example, is one of those by Rebecca Roanhouse that has a blind main character, which is super interestingly well written. And then Luna Chronicles, while it is a cyborg, but she deals with body parts missing or body parts being too small for her, although that falls also more into the YA category. But anyway. And then another one that I thought was really interesting, and that's more indie published again, would be Hen's Like Secret, which deals with autism and anxiety, which I thought was very, very well done as well.
Dragon Mage as well from Emil Spencer is another one that is phenomenal for that.
Absolutely, yeah. So there are a lot of good books out there. Let's start with The Last Gift. I'm telling you, it's so well worth it. Well, awesome. Well, before we depart, Allegra, anything else that you want to let us know? Well, whatever the right English sentence is for that.
Not much. I think we covered a lot of really, really big topics. Mostly I just encourage everyone out there who is worried about putting in too much diversity or too much of themselves to just go for it. It's been my experience as an author that the more genuine we are about our struggles and what makes our lives challenging ends up being good material for why a hero's life would be challenging. And we are in an incredibly playful time, so it's wonderful to see how the indie and the trad world are starting to embrace that. It's very exciting to be in the book world right now.
As a reader as well, I can tell you that much. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Allegra, for taking the time and for talking with me about your amazing series, The Last Gift, and in general about your AO collective. All of Allegra's links will be down in the description for her social media, for her Discord, for everything, for the books, of course. Give her a big shout out if you see this. Let her know that you are super interested in reading her book, or if you've read it, definitely let her know what you thought about the book. I can tell you, she and I have been chatting back and forth a little bit as well, like my OMGs and what have you done all over her chat card. So definitely do that as well. And then I hope I see you soon with another Reading Across the Shelf or with any other video. Till then.